Hello, Blaine Gray here from Plastering for Beginners. In today's video, we're going to compare sponge float plastering to your traditional way of plastering. We're going to run two tests. We're going to have a normal wall, which we'll do plaster normally in a normal fashion. Then we'll have another wall that we'll use with a sponge float. We'll go through the process of exactly how to do sponge float plastering, go it step by step, and then also compare it to what you would do in a normal situation if you were plastering in a more traditional way. So that's what we're going to do. At the end, I'm going to give my verdict on which one I think's better. And I was actually really surprised by the verdict. So keep an eye out and then decide for yourself from the video whether it's worth trying or not. So that's that. Let's get into the video. I'll show you how it's done, how it works, and then get right into it. Cheers. Okay then, let's get to it. We've got two walls here and we've got two different situations. But basically what we're going to do is show the big difference between using sponge float when we're plastering and just plastering in a conventional manner where we do the usual routine. Basically this is wall number one. It's the exact same process as what you'd expect from anything else, and all we're doing is just applying a plaster. So this is the first coat of plaster. Obviously we've got the top half sorted, and I recommend for anyone starting out, always start from the top half of the wall and then work your way down. So big long strokes, applying the plaster and trying to get it as even as possible. Obviously that's the biggest part of the battle when you're starting out, or in general at all, but basically this is the exact same process as what you'd expect for a sponge float. We're not going to do anything different. I'm not going to go too deep into it. This video is not about how to apply the plaster, but we're just going to try and get some results and decide what is actually better in plastering and if sponge float plastering is even worth getting into. So what we do, first coat of plaster, apply it. Stage 2, we flatten the first coat. It's always advisable if you want to keep your wall flat to make sure that first coat has been flattened off. And now what I've got there is a speed skim. It's a 1.2 metre one. And I must say, I wasn't won over at the beginning, I must admit, but I absolutely love this thing now. And what I will say, it does have a bit of a breaking in period. If you use it frequently, you will get used to it. And not only that, I find that the blades sharpen up a lot more than what they were originally. Like any other trowel, it does need a bit of breaking in time, and I absolutely love it. I must admit, if you have one, give it a go, and if you don't like it, try it again, because it's a great piece of kit. So stage 3, what we do now is apply the second coat of plaster. Directly on top of it, depending what stage you're at, I put it on straight after I've just flattened it with a speed skim. So no matter what time you're at, I just immediately put on a second coat. Because the speed skim basically allows you to plaster directly onto what you've just flattened. Because it's plastic, it won't stick to moisture and it won't make a bubble or crazing, so you can just go directly on top of it. It's the exact same for sponge float plastering. You can do the exact same method, exact same process. What we do now, stage 4, is we flatten the second coat. Don't go crazy, we're not here to get it spot flat, but what we want to do is get rid of any high spots, any high ridges of plaster that have stuck, and basically we just want to start giving it a flat consistency. What I do like to do at this stage, and I like to get it early doors, is scrape any excess plaster we've got on the edges. So what I'm doing is scraping it from the ceiling there. You're always going to get a bit of overspill into what you've plastered onto the previous background. Use the head of your trowel, and what I do is chip away any high or rough spots that have stuck to the other side of the wall, and then flatten it with the fat that you're collecting from the plaster. Basically, this way you're just cleaning up early doors. You clean it at an early stage, and you don't have to worry about loads of mess, loads of excess plaster everywhere, and you don't want to be doing it later on when your plaster's starting to dry. If you get it in early, it's good housekeeping, it's good practice, and it's generally a better form of plastering because you're on top of it from the beginning rather than rushing later on down the line when you might not have as much time to worry about it. So that's what I'm going to say about cleaning the edges up. Same process. This is the exact same process with sponge floating as well. We're doing the exact same thing. Just flattening the wall. We're not using any water at the moment. The plaster's still quite wet. We're just flattening it with the trowel. Getting rid of any ripples. Getting the wall flat from the get-go. And what I will say is if you have any areas that need filling, with your fat, collect and fill in any holes, any areas that need bit of attention. There might be a few bits where it's scratched or it's been affected by even your speed skim. Sometimes can affect your plaster when you're using it. this is a good time to start filling any areas that are a bit low, that have holes. And just start making your wall, start making it flat. You're not going to get it perfect this stage, but the nicer it is, the better. So obviously, the more we can get done at early stages, the easier it's going to be further down the line. So that's that. Just flattening it in nicely. Take your time. And again, in this weather actually, you haven't got loads of time because it's so bloody hot. It's in the middle of summer. But this is where everything changes. Right now, this is where we get into the sponging. I do it after I flatten the second coat. So this is stage 5. This is when I get my sponge float out. I've got a little hand sprayer. This was £3 from Asda. And I must admit, it's a great bit of kit. For £3, it's brilliant. So what I use this now to spray the walls down. You just want a light mist. You don't want crazy amount of water. You don't want to make it too wet. You just a light haze of water over your background, over the plaster. And just make sure you've got a nice amount. Don't go crazy. Don't drench it. And definitely don't get hose on it. Just get a nice little amount on. Because all we're going to do is livening up the plaster. So this is what we use. This is a little sponge float. It's called sponge float. It's from Rafina. I've got a fine one. You get different options. You've got a coarse, medium coarse, fine. This one's a fine one. And all you do is I keep the float flat to the wall. Literally, I'm doing a figure of eight motion. It's what we get taught. It's what I do a lot when I'm rendering and when I'm doing any floating actually. Figure of 8. Keep the float flat to the plaster. You don't need to put a load of pressure, but literally just it's nice swirling motions. And what we're doing is we're flattening any areas that have been left behind or any sections that are a bit higher. And what it will do is actually take any high spots away and fill in the low spots. And it's not only does that, but it livens plaster. It gives it it brings it back as if it was the original state again. And it basically, what I found, it just makes your walls a lot flatter. And this is totally different. You won't be doing this now if this was traditional method of plastering. All you would be doing is flattening your wall again. Maybe a bit of water, but if this was your normal way of plastering, you wouldn't be using a sponge float. And I'm going to bring it close up. You can see it leaves a grain. This is only a fine float, so it hasn't got a thickness to it. This is only a faint line. And I find for anyone starting out, for any beginners, it's probably a better way. And saying that, if you want to get more into the traditional side of plastering or want to get into the realms of learning how to mix it or anything like that, click the link below. We've got a welcome course that you're available. You can have it for free. It's from our website and it's available for anyone who's starting plastering and anyone who wants to start learning it for themselves. We teach how to mix plaster, how to apply the plaster, how to plaster your first wall, and basically get into the basics. It's completely free. Click at the link below after you've watched this video, obviously. Don't leave us straight away. And then that's free. So anyway, back to the sponge floating. It's been about 5 minutes later after I've floated it up. And now I've got my Rafina Superflex. I just find it's a lot easier after you've floated it to use this trowel to get it right. And what you'll find is we're trying to get rid of the lines that have been put in. Do you know them lines I was showing you before? What we're doing is you'll collect the fat from the wet plaster and you'll start filling in them sections. What you'll find is a wall will start getting really nice, really flat. Just keep a nice even patch on it. Don't push too hard, and all you're doing is just clearing them lines up. You should find it's quite easy. As long as you've done it after the stage 5, you didn't do it too early, you'll find that it shouldn't be too wet either. As long as you put a light haze of water on, didn't go too crazy. Give it about 5 minutes after it's floated, and that's an ideal time to start troweling your plaster. Again, you wouldn't be doing this if you was doing traditional plastering. This is something you wouldn't do. You wouldn't be troweling out your lines because obviously they wouldn't be there. You wouldn't have used a float. And as you can see, I'm picking out a bit of dirt. This is a great time to start filling it. You want to be doing it now. You want to be filling any holes now when you're sponge floating because it does dry fast, this method. Right, so now we go back to the second trowel. And it's the exact same process. Now we're back to normality. You do this for your normal plastering. What I do with this traditional sense is I wet the edges down. This wall hasn't had the moisture that the sponge floating has. It's not had the same amount of water, and basically what we're doing is lubricating the plaster back up. We're doing the reverse of what we've done with the sponge floating. where the plaster on here is getting quite firm now. We need a bit of water on the edges just to keep the plaster lubricated enough so we can start troweling it flat. So obviously water on the edges, water at the bottoms, and we're literally just keeping it lively just so we can start flattening it. The difference as well is, as you can see, I'm still using a Marshalltown trowel here. I'm not using the Superflex, and I still recommend you should use your standard trowel at this point if you're doing it in a traditional sense. Again, it's a bit different. The sponge float way, instead of wetting the edges down, I don't. I just keep the trowel lubricated. So what I'm doing is cleaning the trowel off every time, because you will be collecting a bit of fat at this point. You've got to remember the wall is still quite wet after the amount of water we gave it. We've sponged it back up. And a side note, this is what you should do for both sponge float and traditional plastering. Clean your door liners up, get the excess plaster off on the edges, make it look tidy, and make sure you're doing a good job for the carpenters. Same with the back boxes. Once you've finished, clean them out. It's just easy to make sure that anyone ahead of you has got an easy life. You don't want your door liners to be covered in plaster. It don't make you look good, and it's not easy for the chippies. But back to the plastering. Again, as you can see, I'm just wetting the trowel up and getting rid of any excess fat, any excess plaster on the edge of my trowel. And you should be finding at this point, it is actually taking back up again, even though it's been soaked. It does take up a lot faster, but you don't need any water in your trowel. And just keeping your trowel lubricated so you don't pull. Otherwise, if you don't, it might drag. And obviously, you want to be keeping the trowel clean. We don't want excess plaster left on the trowel as we're flattening, because it will affect your finish. So that's the only slight difference at this point with the traditional and sponge float way. Same process, same troweling techniques. Except one, you wet the wall, that's the traditional, and when you're sponge floating, you don't wet the wall at this point. You just keep your trowel nice and lubricated and clean it off. Because, as I've said, the sponge floated way, it's had enough water on there already. So now we're coming to the next stage. This is stage 7. This is a wet trowel. This is where we go back both walls, the exact same process. Use your watering brush. Literally just use your watering brush to slide across the wall and just wet the wall. And then what we're doing now is, this is called a cross trowel. We're working against the way we've been plastering previously. Working against the way you would usually. We've been plastering upwards motions. This cross trowel just takes out any lumps, takes out any last minute high spots you plaster, and just makes your wall extra flat. Easy process. I've shown you this before, so I won't go mad into it. Using your water brush, sweep across the wall, and then just literally firm pressure with your trowel, horizontally move across the wall. Easy process. And again, if you want it in more detail, sign up to the course below, because we will show you that in a more more detail. Same process for the sponge floating. Using my water brush to soak the wall up. At this point, it will be wet. And same idea, we're just getting a wall nice and flat now, working against the way we was working previously. Obviously, this has had a bit more attention. It's been flattened with a float, it's been flattened with a speed skim, it's been flattened with trowels. At this point, this wall should be pretty flat, because it's had a lot more advancements in the traditional sense. So again, just simple process. Use your water brush, keep your trowel clean, and then work against the way you was previously. Nice easy process, and these are the exact same as what you would do in a traditional sense. Leading nicely onto the final stage of plastering. This is called the dry trowel. We're roughly about, I think now it's been a hot day, timing's a bit skewy, but I think it's roughly about 2.5 hours in now. So it's quite a fast hit, really. And what I do find with a sponge float, it is a slightly faster process in your traditional sense, but we'll go into that at the moment in a bit. This is dry trowel, because all you're doing is keeping your trowel completely dry, no water on the walls. This is for your sponge float way and the traditional way, same process. You're literally just giving that wall a final polish. And I'll be honest, I usually like to use the Rafina Plasiflex for this, but I left mine in the sun and it melted. So there's a tip for you. If you do have a Plasiflex or a plastic trowel, don't leave it outside. So because of that, I'm using the good old Superflex. But easy process, just dry trowel. And that leads us nicely onto the conclusion. So I've done 2 walls, one wall the traditional way, the wall you're seeing now with the sponge float way. And now I want to give my verdict. And I was really surprised by this. I was expecting to do it, because I have done sponge floating before, but you know, I thought it would be the same. I've not done it in ages. I was blown away by the results I was getting with the sponge float plaster. And I've not done it in a long time, so I'm probably not the master at doing it, but it just left such a nicer finish. It just looked a more complete. This has got a few, you know, a few little bumps. I must admit it was rushed a little bit, but the areas where I've sponge floated it was just such a nicer finish. It was easier to do, less stress on my joints. It was a nicer process. Okay, slightly wetter because of the spraying bottle, I must admit that. But the finish just looked so much better than the traditional way. And I must admit, since doing this video, I've been doing a lot of sponge float plastering. And that's what I've been focusing on. Because look at the finish on that. It just looks bang on. It's not too shiny, it's a slightly matte texture to it, so it's better for the painters. So it just looks a lot more complete than that wall, which I've done traditionally. And I actually really enjoyed the process. So I'll actually be, to be honest, be doing it a bit more often. So that's my result. I'm going to say the sponge float plastering was better. It was faster, it was a better finish, it was easier on the joints, it was nicer to get a finish. The only thing I would say is make sure you set up lights. You need lights in there. Don't do it without them, because you won't be able to see the grains and you won't be able to see what you've got to get out. But I'm going to be expanding on this. I think I'm going to be making a few more videos on sponge floating, and I'm trying to get you through it. But let me know what you think. If you've done it before, if you have used sponge float plastering, let me know in your comments. Is it for you, or do you think it's a complete waste of time? Let us know, and let's see what the other plasterers think, because it'd be interesting to see the difference between sponge floating and see if they found the results to be as effective as this. So put your comments in the box below and let us know. This is Blaine Gray, Plaster for Beginners. Thanks for watching, and if you like the video, please like it, and if you liked it and you want us to watch some more, please subscribe. Thanks a lot. Blaine Gray here. Speak soon. Bye.